Hi everybody and welcome to another video. My name is Matt and this is What Matters to Matt. And that's right, on today's video we are going to take a closer look at the Adidas Evo SL ATR version. Now I wanted and felt like I needed to start off this review a little bit differently than I normally do because obviously when I get into a review of the Evo SL ATR there will be lots of folks who are really looking for an answer on how this version compares to the original Evo SL because the whole world seems to have gone crazy over the past year for that shoe. And whether or not Adidas knew it at the time when they released the original, that it would be such a popular shoe, they have not shied away from trying to tap into that popularity through not only releasing countless colorway options of the original, but also releasing newer versions with updates such as the Evo SL Woven that just recently came out and the ATR version. That being said, I think I have one big confession, and I feel like as a running shoe geek who likes to review shoes here on YouTube, I may need to have my running shoe geek status revoked if that's even a thing, because I have not run in the Evo SL. And when you talk about poor running shoe decisions, probably the biggest one that I made in 2025 was when I was in the store faced with purchasing either the Evo SL or the, at the time, newly released Rebel V5. I had both of them on my feet and picked the shiny new one instead of the Legend. Not that the Rebel V5 is a horrible shoe, but it lost its pop pretty quickly and universally seems that it can't even hold a candle to the mighty Evo SL. Poor decisions sometimes are made. Now we also need to consider that justifying the need to spend more money on running shoes to my wife has always been pretty difficult, and it seems she doesn't understand the need for yet another pair of shoes. So I take advantage of not getting shoes sent to me before the release date and gather up all the information I can from other reviews to help decide whether I want to spend my cash on it. So based on what I had heard, seen, and read, here is why the ATR version made sense. Hopefully you guys will appreciate this a little bit more than my wife. Hopefully she's not watching this review. She probably will. Sorry. All right, so the upper is water repellent, making it more comfortable for all those sloppy runs through the winter months. We'll talk a little bit more about the upper as we get into the upper itself and that comfort. Also, the upper is more rigid than the original, and that's going to be considered as a negative, but one of the concerns from folks that seem to not get along with the original was that the upper did not help them in terms of stability and just staying on that platform. And so there is potential for that upper in the ATR version where it is more rigid to actually help hold you on top of that platform, making it feel just a little bit more stable. And finally, the outsole. The outsole and that rubber coverage could also potentially make this shoe a little bit more stable. We'll talk about that more when we get to the outsole. And of course, much like the upper, the added rubber could make this a more of an all-weather shoe. So as usual, we're going to go down through the upper, the midsole, and the outsole, and ultimately after watching this review and several other reviews on the Adidas Evo SL ATR, you will be able to decide whether this shoe is worth your hard-earned cash. So the upper of the ATR version is what I would call comfortable enough and breathable enough. There are a few give and takes companies seem to need to make when bringing out an all-weather version of a shoe, and one is the comfort of the upper material. It's a little bit more coarse and a little bit more rigid. It's not uncomfortable on my feet. It just never disappears out on the run like we might get out of a softer, more breathable upper. That being said, I still find that it's flexible enough, and the lockdown was actually really good. I have no heel slip whatsoever. The serrated edges are miles ahead of what we find in most Adidas shoes, and there's no fiddling around, retying, or any of that nonsense. You just tie your shoe as tight as you want, and it stays that way. Now, being a little bit nitpicky, and of course this is sort of a me problem, I think, than anything else, but one caveat is that if you are like me, I probably will ratchet my laces down more than the average and or more than what would be recommended in a running shoe. And with no give in the laces at all, it's pretty easy to actually over tighten them, and I've had to stop a few different times and actually loosen these shoes up once I've got out there on the run, especially during those longer runs. There's really no flexibility between this upper and those laces. The tongue is gusseted, which is awesome, and it's something that we don't see in the original Evo SL. And the heel is actually pretty rigid. All that translates into an upper that holds my foot well, has no rubbing irritation, fits true to size, protects my foot from the elements as much as you could expect from a running shoe, but come the summer, we'll make this a little warmer than what I want or need out on the run. So it really checks that box on what I was looking for in an all-weather running shoe, if by all weather we mean any other time than the middle of the summer. So what can we say about this midsole of the Evo SL ATR? Well, I guess the first thing is that we could say that it's exactly like the one that we find in the Evo SL. We have 40 millimeters in the heel and 33.5 millimeters in the forefoot for about a 6.5 millimeter drop, and it is all Adidas Light Strike Pro. But it is important to point out that much like a lot of other brands, Adidas has a few different versions of the Light Strike Pro out on the market, and this is the same one that we found in one of my all-time favorite shoes, the Adidas Adios Pro 3, and not the much softer version that we find in the Adios Pro 4. Now, even though this is the older version of Light Strike Pro, it probably lends itself a little bit better in the daily trainer because it is more resilient, likely still lasts quite a bit longer, and it's more stable. It's stable enough to put into a daily trainer that you don't need some sort of stiffening material like a plate, rod, or rings. Just straight up Light Strike Pro and a midfoot shank, but we'll talk about that in a sec. It never bottoms out on long runs. It is consistent from start to finish. It is just a fun ride. I have heard some folks not being able to get along with the Evo SL because they find it to be a little bit too unstable, and I do get that. This is a tall stack shoe, and it's a super foam, so it's not going to be the most stable thing out there. But Adidas really made no attempt at all to make the Evo SL more stable beyond having a small midfoot shank that does add a little bit of rigidity through the flex of the middle of the shoe, and there's no extra foam coming up the side of the shoe to help cup your foot into the platform. And they also didn't really widen the platform any to make any of those stability elements put into the shoe. And those are all things companies will do to help keep a shoe more approachable for more people and make them more stable, but all those things also run the risk of decreasing the fun factor. This is a fun shoe. And as I was thinking about this review, all of a sudden I remembered that in a few different reviews of other shoes from other brands, I have said I would be super curious if they tried a full midsole, no dual density type setup, no extra supports, straight fun foam. What would happen? And Adidas answered that question. They created a perfect formula of a shoe that was affordable enough with that fun factor that the whole world has been recommending it. It's the shoe that they're stacking all other new daily trainers up against. But again, if you dig deep enough into all the reviews out there, including deep dive places like Reddit, it just did not work for some people, but it's worked for me. It's been stable enough. Now the outsole. The outsole is another big departure from the original. We have basically full rubber coverage with these small little lugs, with the goal being to not make this into an all-out trail shoe, but a shoe that would work better when conditions got wet or sloppy, or even if you found yourself on crushed rock or a hard packed trail, you'd be better off with this than the flat rubber outsole we see on the Evo SL. I think I do have to point out here that even though I didn't run in the Evo SL, and certainly not in some bad conditions, with the Adios Pro 3, which has a similar outsole as the Evo SL, I ran it in all sorts of conditions, and I still have my fastest half marathon time trial that I've ever run in that shoe from a couple of years ago, when conditions were pretty far from perfect and I really had no issues. Of course, not perfect, but it was definitely runnable. Also, that Ed Budd said the other day when I was watching his comparison between the different versions of the Evo SL is that the lugs on the ATR version actually made the shoe less stable for him than the original. And my hope was that the increased rubber coverage would obviously make this work a little better through Canadian winter, but also add a bit of stability in the bottom of the shoe, mostly because I want to use this for all sorts of runs, including long runs where if it was too unstable, it probably just wouldn't work for me. The thing is that how, where, and how much rubber is put into an outsole of a shoe is often overlooked in terms of how stable the shoe ultimately feels. But when you think about it, more rubber can add more rigidity and decrease the flexibility, which also means too much rubber will make a shoe feel clunky and less fun. Not a problem here. The outsole does not get in the way of that fun factor. It also worked really well for me. I don't notice the lugs when I'm running on dry pavement, and it seems to hold its own through the slop. But don't think that you are getting a trail shoe or something that works nearly as well on icy conditions like the Icebug Mirror that I reviewed not that long ago. I am, however, a little bit curious about how the overall wear on the outsole, because previous Adidas shoes that I have run in, most recently the Adios Pro 3 and the Boston 12, the outsole seems pretty indestructible, but they did not have the lungs on the bottom of them. So overall, for now, I'm very happy with the outsole in this shoe, and it's not the ultimate grip, it's not the ultimate rubber. I still think Puma grip holds that crown, but it's really, really solid. Ultimately, what does all that mean? And do I think the Evo SL ATR was worth my hard-earned cash? Absolutely. Do I think it is better than the Evo SL original? And I'm just reminding you that I do not own that shoe. I love the water resistance of the ATR version that we don't have in the original. I love the laces more than what we find in the original, and frankly, almost every other Adidas shoe. I always loved the gusseted tongue where I can get it, and the outsole seems to be working really, really well. I also think that the more rigid upper and increased rubber probably makes it slightly more stable. But you pay slightly more for the ATR version, you are going to make sacrifices like a slight increase in weight. And from just trying on the original, even though folks were not super impressed with the upper overall, from the fit standpoint, it still feels a bit more comfortable than the ATR. And now you are usually able to find the original on a decent sale, so that slight difference in cost becomes even greater. All that makes the original probably a better bang for your buck, but for me, right now where I am in marathon prep with some not always the best conditions for the next couple of months, if I had the two sitting beside each other, I'm probably going to be reaching for the ATR version more. So what's your thoughts? Put them in the comment section down below. Evo SL, Evo SL ATR, Evo SL Woven, or something completely different. Guys, that is my thoughts on the Adidas Evo SL ATR. If you're not subscribed and like this video, please consider subscribing. If you are a longtime subscriber from the bottom of my midsole, thank you so much for sticking around. I will see you in the next video.